Uvluluatak. Good afternoon. My name is Nari, and I am a recovering alcoholic. I've been sober for a little over 3 years, since August of 2022. And in this video, I just want to talk about what that journey looked like for me. I'm treating it a little bit like a speaker meeting at an AA meeting, which AA stands for Alcoholics Anonymous, and that I'll kind of talk about life before alcohol, during, and then the recovery process. The recovery process was rough. That was tough. There are two main kinds of alcoholics, the binge drinker and the daily drinker. I was the daily drinker. I probably went months and months without ever being able to show zero blood alcohol in my body. I knew what alcoholism was from a very young age. My mom struggled with alcoholism, much of my family struggled with alcoholism, and it was very potentially violent. There was cops called a lot. It was very stressful. And this is a pretty standard experience within my community. I'm Alaskan Inuit, or Inupiaq more specifically, which within Indigenous communities, it tends to be, addiction and alcoholism tend to be more prevalent because of the trauma that our people have gone through. If you know anything about alcoholism, you'll learn that it's highly correlated with having trauma. ACE scores, which is adverse childhood experiences, very closely can indicate whether or not somebody is going to have an addiction or alcoholism. And Indigenous communities as a whole have experienced community trauma and harm. And there's a lot of hurt there. There's a lot of data out there that supports this. One of them that comes to mind, and I think is probably referenced the most, has to do with this mice they put in a cage, obviously, and they gave them an option of two different kinds of water. One was laced with, I think, methamphetamines, and the other was just plain water. And the mice always went for the drug water. They would put some of the mice in a very enriched environment where they had a lot of toys, they had community, other mice to play with, there was tunnels, there was good food, and when they had an enriched environment, they were more likely to drink the regular water. So I knew from a very early age that I did not want to become an alcoholic. It was very harmful, very scary, violent at times, and just painful. So when it happened, that was tough. And I could have known early on. I liked drinking so much that I was very, very careful with my drinking so that I wouldn't become an alcoholic. And that worked for a while. Like, here's your sign. I could have known then, but eventually it didn't. I want to say in 2019 was probably when my problem drinking really started to show itself, and I was allowing myself a little bit of freedom. I had just gone through a separation from my ex-husband, and I was letting myself have a little bit of fun, so to say. In the summer of 2020, I had a very clear thought right outside on my deck that if I didn't stop drinking now, I was going to have a problem, a real problem, a more serious problem. I had that thought, and then I didn't think about it again for months. Then I had a serious problem. I was drinking heavily and every day there for a while. And in 2021, there was about a 5-month period where I stopped drinking alcohol and was what you would call in AA a dry drunk. This is basically when you're not drinking, but you're not working a program, you're not addressing any of the issues that caused you to start drinking in the first place. I also wasn't taking the vitamins that my brain needed in order to kind of equalize out. So I was just really tired and drained, and I wasn't having a good time. I just kept waiting for my old self to come back. And I didn't know that there were vitamins and things that I could do to help my body to recover. When I got sober in 2021, I was drinking so heavily that I asked for help. I asked for someone who cared for me to help me quit drinking. I remember the first morning after I said that I would quit, I think by midday or by that evening, I was literally shaking like this. That's how like bad my tremors were. And I couldn't drink any water. I couldn't hold anything down. I was dry heaving. I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't drink anything. And even just a tiny sip of water, not even enough for me to swallow, just enough for me to get my mouth wet because I was just parched, that would send me dry heaving to the toilet. It was unpleasant. I didn't know how dangerous it was. The person didn't know how dangerous it was. And when I expressed what I was going through, they did go and get me some drinks, and I weaned down from there. So like I said, I was sober for 5 months, and I relapsed because I was building resentment towards this person that had helped me get sober. Of course, this is on me. There is no blame to offer anyone else when you relapse. It really is your own program. That was the excuse that I had, and it was almost like a vengeance thing to go and get alcohol. So how crazy is how crazy is that? Can I just go on a side tangent with this so that somebody can pity me? This person was living in my house, not paying or helping for anything other than some of the foods that they were eating, and making my life miserable. It was so tense in the house because they had a problem with my partner, but it wasn't like having a conversation. Instead, their way of retaliating was just being just angry with that person and making this just the tension so thick within the household. And so I, thinking and hoping that this would help the problem, kicked my partner out of the house, and he left and was gone, and that didn't help anything. And he was at least helping with money and rent and groceries. And I just was really upset that I took this drastic action, and it still didn't help with the weight that was happening within the house, because it wasn't just me, it was my kids as well. So I was frustrated. It was a heavy period where it just was so tense in the house all the time. Anyways, I went and I got a drink, and then I was right back in it. And eventually I kind of went back into the effort of trying to wean myself off and quit. And this was just a constant cycle of trying to wean myself off, getting to a point where it wouldn't physically hurt me, but I was addicted. So it was, I wasn't getting more than 1 or 2 days sober at a time. And eventually I got to the point of my gift of desperation. Now, this happened in August of 2022. I lost my job. And there were some other things that happened. My kid's dad found out that I was drinking and driving with our kids in the car, which was, I think, a moment when it clicked that I was drinking with our kids in the car. I don't think that until I knew that he knew that I really was considering the potential consequences. I embarrassed myself with the people that I worked with, and all of those things combined, it was really scary. I didn't get the shakes, tremors, and I didn't have those symptoms the same. So I maybe didn't have as much alcohol in my system. Honestly, that portion is a little bit of a blur. I don't remember exactly how that went down, but I know that with the lack of alcohol, my body sort of retaliated, and I was having anxiety attacks. I'd never had anxiety attacks before. I could barely get out of bed. I was out of work for 1.5 years almost, with a little contract in the midst of that. So not fully, but essentially I was out of work for 1.5 years. And during that time, I was going through a deep depression. My body was recalibrating, and I didn't get on antidepressants for, I think, almost 1 year, which is wild to think that it took me that long of laying in bed and spending so much time sleeping and not being able to function before I finally got on antidepressants. Anyhow, I was attending this AA meeting. It's a 24-hour online Zoom AA meeting. I was essentially on it 24 hours a day, damn near. I would have it playing in the background when I slept because, especially in that first month, when I would wake up and I just had the weight of all of the consequences of my actions just started racing through my mind, I would be able to tune in to the testimony or the share. The person on Zoom was talking about their experience with alcohol, and that rested my mind a little enough to be able to go back to sleep. At that point, essentially my whole life was AA and just forcing myself and trudging through doing basic things like getting groceries and trying to make sure that we had food and all the things. So that time sucked, but it did get better. And slowly I started to get a clearer head, because in the beginning I was like, I have to change everything. I have to break up with my partner. I just had these wild ideas. And luckily there were people level-headed enough in the meetings to be able to talk me down. And they said, give it a little bit of time. Don't make any major decisions right away. Take your time, allow yourself to recover. And I thank God for that advice, because I probably made a lot of poor decisions. It does get better. I am really happy now. Like I said, I've been sober for a little over 3 years. It's tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow is going to be the beginning of 2026. So since August of 2022, so 3.5 years almost. Not quite. Anyhow, over 3 years I've been sober. And life is really good. Life really picked up after that first 1.5 years. I was blessed enough to have just these really wonderful things happen to me. I accidentally became the executive director for a nonprofit organization. I can't say accidentally. It's just that there really wasn't anyone else that made sense for the position. It's a very niche spot. I'm the executive director for an organization called Sovereign Inupiat for a Living Arctic, and we do cultural things for our community, as well as try to protect our land and waters for future generations. It's really fulfilling work. With that, I hesitate to talk about this piece. If you're struggling with alcohol, there's this method. It's called the Sinclar Method, and I'm going to put somebody on the screen somewhere here in just a second, and she is really up to speed on the Sinclar Method. It's not cold turkey like AA. It's not completely stopping drinking. It's taking a drug called naltrexone. It's a generic, inexpensive drug. You take it while you're drinking, and over time, it disconnects your brain from the addiction of it. Her story is that after a year, she just stopped drinking because she just didn't want to drink anymore.
That's a generic non-addictive medicine that helps the brain to unlearn the alcohol addiction. And because this medicine is generic, it's super cheap. There's no like major pharmaceutical company behind it, like pushing it. There's no money to be made in it.
Here is a website that you can go and take a look at if that's something you're interested in. It says something like 70% success rate. So if you're struggling with alcohol or you're starting to have problem drinking, this could be a solution or an option for you. Other than that, the method that's been used for decades and decades is the AA program, Alcoholics Anonymous. There's a book called Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's actually referred to as the big book within AA. It's the story of Bill and Dr. Bob, the founders of the program, as well as the methods that they used to get themselves sober. And they basically created this program and built a community for support for those who are trying to get sober, because it's an illness. It's becoming more and more understood. I think there's not as much of a stigma attached to it as there used to be. That's really nice. I see on Facebook some of my friends, and even I'll put on there my sobriety date. But I remember when I was younger and my mom was trying to get sober, that was a really, I think, shameful thing to admit that you're an alcoholic outside of the AA world. If AA is something that you're interested in, there's an app. It's called Everything AA, and it has the book within it, although most people recommend you get a hard copy. But it has the book so you can read it on the app. It also has the audiobook. It has the topics of the day or day counters. If you're counting, you can put in the day that you got sober and it'll tell you how many days you have sober, and just a bunch of resources that you can use. You can find online AA meetings through the app. And then if you go to, I think, aa.org, or I'll find it and put it somewhere in here, you can find in-person AA meetings. If you're struggling with alcohol, I have so much love for you. It does get better. It can get better. You need support. You have to learn how to ask for help. That's probably the biggest piece of advice. Whew. Asking for help is the biggest piece of advice that I would give, and it is probably the hardest thing to do. I don't know why you would think that being asking for help isn't so terrible, but it really is one of the hardest things within the program, in my opinion. Ask for help. You can recover. And if you're a recovering alcoholic like me and you're sober, congratulations. You just don't know unless you've been there. So if you're not an alcoholic, I would just encourage you to have empathy for the people that you love. If you know someone that's an alcoholic, there is another program for family, friends, and loved ones of people who are struggling in their alcoholism, because you can't get sober for them, right? They have to do it on their own. And sometimes that can be really challenging to watch a loved one go through that. But there's a program called Al-Anon, and that's a support group for people who are dealing with somebody in their life that they love that's going through it. Sometimes they don't even want to quit, or they don't see their problems. It varies. You can have all kinds of addicts in your life at various levels of comprehension, and Al-Anon is a good source for that. There's also ACA, or Adult Children of Alcoholics, because if you're a child of an alcoholic, you know how challenging that can be. And I went to one of those meetings. Actually, I went to half of it. I was a half an hour late to an hour long meeting for the Adult Children of Alcoholics, and I didn't want to feel those kinds of emotions. I think at some point, maybe I'll be ready to attend some of those meetings to help work through some of the emotions that I have, but not today. There's a lot more, but that is all I've got for this video. So sending so much love.